All right, it's 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We know it is a very busy and stressful time, and many of you are on the brink of going back to school full-time in person, and some of you are in a hybrid or a very complex schedule and not really sure what next week is going to bring. So we know it's a difficult time, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. We are recording. We will send out the recording link and links to all of the resources mentioned tonight in a follow-up email. We'll try and get it out tomorrow evening, if not tomorrow evening, which is Friday. That's right. It'll be over the weekend. We've also compiled a resource document. Denise is in the chat, Denise Olson, Director of Marketing, and she'll post the link to that resource document in the chat. And she'll also, as we proceed through the webinar, try and post some links as we're discussing them, but really try not to interrupt the flow of the conversation. Only the presenters are on camera and have the mic. We're using Zoom webinar as our platform. So we really encourage you to be active in the chat and post questions or talk to your colleagues or whatever. Sometimes the default for people on the chat is just to chat to the panelists, and we don't want to miss what you say or your questions. It should be shared with everyone. So if you need to, you might change your setting to panelists and attendees. So that's just a reminder. We had a very large response to this session. It's very gratifying. And we asked in the registration form if you had a question, and 290 of you had questions. So we shared those questions with the presenters, and they're going to do their best to address some of them in their presentation. They'll also be active in the chat when they're not presenting. We hope to have a few minutes at the end for Q&A. But I think that all of your questions and then what happens tonight and the survey that I hope a lot of you will fill out, that all will inform what we do moving forward with PBL and how we address other sessions like this. All right, let's move forward here. I had to move the caption square away from my controls. My name is Carolyn Jacobs. I'm in the Education Department at GBH, and we are sponsored this evening by several entities. One of them is GBH, which is Boston's PBS station. And the Education Department in GBH is part of GBH. At GBH, we produce a lot of programs that you see on your local stations. American Experience, Frontline, Nova, Masterpiece, lots of programs for kids. They all start in Boston, and then they're shared out through the public media system. And when I was thinking about my opening remarks and I said American Experience, it reminded me, my husband and I watched an American Experience premiere this week, last evening on TV. I think it broadcast on Tuesday and we had it recorded. It's the Blinding of Isaac Woodard, and it's a winner. It is, it just takes your breath away. So I recommend you check it out. Let's see, the second sponsor is PBS Learning Media, which I hope many of you are already familiar with. If not, please check it out. This is a free platform with thousands of digital resources for K-12 across the curriculum. And you're going to be hearing more about that later when Bess presents towards the end of the presentation. And we are also sponsored by NEPM. NEPM is based in Springfield, Massachusetts. It is the newly formed New England Public Media, and it builds on the legacies and strengths of WGBY TV in Springfield, which I know many of you are familiar with, and New England Public Radio, producing local and national programming. And we have Bess Capitanis here with us from NEPM. And we're also here, thank you to the Harold Grinspoon Charitable Foundation. And the sponsor, they also have the sponsor that they, let me start over again. Harold Grinspoon Charitable Foundation and they sponsor the Pioneer Valley Excellence in Teaching Awards. And we have Uli Nagel with us, who leads the programs, and she has a few words of welcome for you.
Thank you, Carolyn, and many thanks to GBH and New England Public Media for organizing this very timely, valuable webinar and for sharing your resources with us. We are really honored to be partnering with you again. This is, I think, our third or fourth year. I just want to extend a brief special welcome to all the winners of the Pioneer Valley Excellence in Teaching Awards that are here tonight, and encourage you, if you have not yet applied for the special Classroom Innovator Prize. We hope this webinar will give you the final push to do so. The deadline is April 9th, and you will have all of 2021 to run your projects. You'll find all the necessary information in your inbox. And we really can't think of a more competent and engaging group of presenters than we have tonight, and trust you'll really enjoy what you're learning during this hour. So thank you and have a great time.
And thank you, Uli. All right, and speaking of presenters, we are very lucky to have two very experienced and savvy PBL people. The first is Suzie Boss. She is an author of, I think 20 is the name. Oh no, maybe it's 10 books. Well, maybe it'll be 20 next year. 10 books, very popular on PBL. And the most recent one, actually there are two recent ones. One is Project-Based Teaching, How to Create Rigorous and Engaging Learning Experiences. And the other is Reinventing Project-Based Learning, Your Field Guide to Real-World Projects in the Digital Age. Suzie is based on the West Coast. She travels extensively around the world leading PBL trainings, and she's also a part of the National Faculty Emeritus of PBL Works. Welcome, Suzie. All right, and then Sarah. Sarah is with PBL Works also. Sarah is based in Massachusetts. She's a senior curriculum manager at PBL Works, where she designs professional learning and curriculum materials. She's a formal bilingual elementary teacher and earned her master's from Harvard in technology, innovation, and education. And we're thrilled to have her also. And joining them is Jeremy Whalen. Jeremy has presented with us on other PBL webinars, of which you will have the links to, by the way, and for past years. Jeremy is department chair and communications and media productions teacher at Northampton High School, with lots of classroom experience to share with you on PBL. And lastly, Bess Capitanis, education coordinator at NEPM, who prior to coming to public media had a long career as a nationally board certified English language arts teacher. Welcome, Bess. And Bess is my colleague in public television. All right, so the agenda tonight, we are going to get right into Suzie very quickly, talking about project-based learning. Then we're going to switch to Jeremy to get a little teacher's perspective, then go to Sarah. Sarah has lots of very specific examples to show. Bess will come on towards the end and talk about resources and give you a little more information about PBS Learning Media. And then I'll come back on for some final remarks. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Suzie.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that introduction, Carolyn. And it's wonderful to be with this program again. I think this is maybe my third year back with you all, so it's fantastic. And I love the energy for project-based learning that you're generating. So do you want to go ahead to the next slide, Carolyn? We're going to start with a poll. I'd love to find out a little bit more about who's in the room with us and what your project-based learning experience is. I have a little shorthand way of describing this. So as you're ready to vote your choice. The first one is maybe you're an armchair traveler who's curious about project-based learning, but you're just kind of reading up, wondering if this is a good fit for you. Or perhaps you're setting out on your very first project this year, or thinking about one. I'd call you a tenderfoot. Maybe you are someone who's done a number of projects. Now you have questions you didn't have before because you know more and you wonder more deeply. So let's call you an explorer. Or perhaps you're someone who has enough experience that you can teach and guide others. So let's call you a scout. So if we could go ahead and vote away, choose your choices, and Carolyn is going to give us the instant results, I think. Wait just a minute for our results to come up. And while we wait for our our results to show. Do we get to see results? Oh, there we are. Oh, we're a very mixed group. Wonderful. Okay, so someone at every every step of the way. And I think the message for all of us is that we all always, even if you're a scout, there's always more to learn about project-based learning. And wherever you're starting today, we hope that you make some progress, in your journey forward. So if we could go on from there, it's great to see we've got a wide range of experience and interests. So you may be wondering why project-based learning and why right now?
Whoops. Oh, I'm sorry. I did
That's
something.
okay. I'll keep talking while you get
Yeah.
back
You
to
keep
our
talking.
slides.
Yes.
So, we all know what we've been living through and what our students have been living through, this unprecedented, global pandemic. What our students are seeing around them are adults who are having to really wrestle with hard problems with unknown answers, complex issues. They're having to collaborate, they're having to communicate, think about different cultural issues. How do we engage diverse populations now that we have a vaccine? How do we make sure the vaccines work? What kind of scientific knowledge do we have? All of these tough questions are demonstrating to students what it takes to really face an important challenge. Some future time in your students' lives, they may be the ones responsible to respond to a big challenge, and they're going to need these very sets of skills that I've just been talking about. What's great about project-based learning, what I love about it as a longtime advocate, is that it provides a how. It gives us a framework to think about how do we teach important academic content, which we know our students need, and we know our states expect us to be imparting to students and building that deep understanding, but also those additional skills around creative problem solving, around critical thinking, collaboration, all the things that are important from one issue to the next and really transfer from one situation to the next. Project-based learning gives us this both and we're able to accomplish both things at once. And I think another piece of the now, we're going to talk a little bit more as we go on with project-based learning in different kinds of settings, but we know more about project-based learning's effectiveness than we've ever known before. The research base is big and growing. If you're one of those armchair travelers who wonders, well, it sounds fun, but does it really work? We're going to share in the chat for you a link to some really interesting and exciting new research from Lucas Education Research. This is the research arm of Edutopia, which some of you may know, a sister organization that's more public facing from the George Lucas Foundation. They've just released 4 very major studies about the effectiveness of project-based learning. Everything from how it builds literacy skills in the elementary grades, how it builds student science understanding in those early years, all the way to AP courses and how project-based learning helps students succeed when there is very rigorous end of term exam ahead of them. Students are doing really well in a project-based setting, and it's a more equitable group of students, a more diverse group of students who are taking those courses because they're more interesting, they're more hands-on, they're more application of knowledge. So lots of good reasons why project-based learning and why now is as good a time as ever to jump in. So if we can go ahead, Carolyn. One of the things teachers wonder about is getting started with project-based learning. They think, do I have to forget everything I know about how I've been teaching before? Is this a complete re-understanding of everything that I know and understand about teaching and learning? I would say no. I would say you're using your most effective strategies in a particular way. And you're going to hear Jeremy in a moment talk about what these strategies look like in his classroom. But we know from research generally about learning and learning that works and that gets students to deep results, that it's important for teachers to set high expectations for all their students, that getting to know your students, having strong relationships, that's really key to setting the stage for learning to happen. That students learn best when they get frequent and helpful feedback and when they get time to use that feedback to make their work even better, go through a second draft, a third draft, a final revision before they share it publicly. And throughout good teaching experiences, students are learning how to learn. There's deliberate teaching of learning strategies. These are qualities of high impact learning generally. I would argue, but you can't do project-based learning if you're not also embedding these strategies in your practice. So the things that you're already doing that you know work really well, the things that you love about teaching, hold on to those if you're a tenderfoot or if you're a newcomer to project-based learning, but find a way to bring those strategies into the context of the exciting projects that we're going to be talking about today. So next slide, please. So we all know that the pandemic has upended teaching and learning in all kinds of ways. And one of them, of course, forcing a shift to virtual learning. But what I've heard from teachers I've been talking with in around the US and around the world is a desire by some teachers not to retrench and go back to worksheets and memorization type activities. That this moment is one that really demands engagement. Our students, lives are unsettled. They're having to learn from home in new contexts, learning perhaps new tools to get that done. They need to be in with you. They need to feel that there's still a strong relationship and that the learning that's happening is engaging and interesting to them. It's pretty easy to check out on Zoom if you've been on a Zoom call and you worry that your students might not be there with you as much as you'd like them to be. So how do you make learning more engaging, meaningful for your students? This photo is an elementary example from a school in Tacoma, Washington, Sherman STEAM School. They were right about to launch into a phase of a project that involves some outdoor experiences, some water quality sampling around the Salish Sea in the Seattle area for a big project they were doing on water quality. Then the pandemic hits. They did not want to give up on that rich learning experience. So they made a shift, they made a pivot. They couldn't now take their students out to the waterfront to talk to experts and to gather water samples, but they could use technology to bring students face to face with the experts. And instead of sending students out to the waterfront to gather water quality data, they could have them walk their own neighborhoods, take a look at where does runoff go in our neighborhood? What are the potential pollutants getting into the stormwater drains right on our street? So students were still making observations to help them come up with problem identification and solutions that eventually they shared with those same experts in a kind of a virtual town hall experience. And one of their messages was, this is no time to go back to worksheets. Our students really deserve the engaging learning experiences and the meaningful learning that's going to stick with them that happens in PBL. Next slide, please. You'll be hearing from Sarah in a few minutes from PBL Works, and they've done an amazing job of gathering resources about what does project-based learning look like in remote or blended learning experiences. Lots of blogs from teachers who were just right in the throes of figuring this out. This is a new challenge that teachers had to address with literally no preparation time. One of those great teacher bloggers is one of my colleagues and friends there, Kelly Risset, who talked about taking a project that already existed as a project plan. Someone else had developed the idea, it was in the project library at PBL Works, and she modified it to work in remote settings. It was every bit as meaningful. It was a project about redesigning a community. How do we make our community more inviting? How do we change public spaces? So these were middle school students in this case. They had to make some pivots in how the project actually ran. But some of the things that Kelly was able to help us understand that really made it possible was using her Zoom time for both full class conversations and breakout groups. So students still had that small peer group time to work together and to collaborate and to make sure that those breakout groups were really productive. So there were expectations of what would happen there. Using technology to connect students with the experts and folks they wanted to interview, using technology to help them map their community. They couldn't go out for the kind of community walk that she wanted to do, but they could use mapping tools to take a look at what's in our community, what's where, what might we like to be different. And I think a really key part of her success was taking time to take the temperature of the group on a regular basis. She did weekly reflections as this project unfolded, asking questions not just about the learning, of course you want to understand, check in on students' learning and their thinking, but also how are you feeling about this project? How's it going for you? How can we make virtual learning a better experience for you? And then finally, by the end of the project, getting to really a wonderful town hall experience. It just happened to happen on a screen with virtual attendees rather than the face-to-face kind of project showcase. So lots of pivots and good thinking there, but you can learn from teachers who are doing this hard work because a lot of them are sharing their practice in blogs and storytelling and webinars like this. So one more slide, please. So a few things for you to think about as you're going forward. And I would love to have more chances to talk with you individually. I'm going to start by throwing out some questions for you to consider and ask you to respond in the chat to one of these that might interest you. And I'm going to suggest you start with thinking about your strengths as a teacher. What are you already good at that you want to bring into your project-based learning practice? You're interested in project-based learning, or you want to go deeper with it? What are your strengths and teaching practices and strategies that are going to really help your students succeed in this new style of learning if PBL is new for you? So I'm going to take a moment to look at your chat responses there. Go ahead and reply to that now. And I'm going to let you know as we're going along here that as you listen to my colleagues on this call and learn a lot from them, I'm going to be as active as I can on the chat. So if there are particular questions based on what I've had to say so far today, and you'd like a response, I will reply as much as I can in the chat, and we'll see if we can keep this conversation going. And I know you're going to get resources at the end as well, but I'm seeing some really wonderful responses here. I love this sense of different ways to assess how students are learning, building relationships with your student, turning more of the learning over to your students. These are great strengths. And of course, your passion. I see a lot of you talking about your own passion. So I hope all of this kind of informs your next steps with project-based learning. And I hope that the resources and examples and wonderful stories you're going to hear coming up are going to help you. To do that really well is going to be Jeremy. So you're going to hear from a teacher doing project-based learning in virtual and blended spaces right now with a wonderful story to share. So thank you. I'm going to jump off.
Okay, so thank you so much, Suzie. And it's an honor presenting with you. This is our second presentation that we've done together. And for anybody that is looking for resources, Suzie's literally wrote the book on this. I came into this profession not really understanding what PBL was, and just it naturally came to me. And once I started formalizing some of this, it all started coming together. So I believe that we're going to start with is a short little video. It's a 1-minute video that is called the Cold Open for the news program. We have a weekly news program that the students do. So it's a kind of like an SNL kind of cold open, just whatever happened in the week, something relevant for that week, they create a small short video for. And this was on the Mars rover. So let's take a look at this.
Welcome to the transcript.
Okay, and if you transition to the next slide, the reason why I wanted to show you that is a couple of different reasons. One, the students made this during their time remote, so they had to communicate and interact via computer. It also demonstrates a lot of what I love about project-based learning, in that it plays to the strengths and creativities to each student. One student is really into special effects, so you see those in it. One student really loves to edit. One student was really primarily behind the camera and directing. And so while they all have an understanding of all these things, they can really kind of use their strengths and their passions and fuse them together in a really collaborative way. In a meaningful way too. That is shown to their entire student base, but it's also shown on YouTube. So just getting into it, these are a couple of tips that I have. Practice educational jujitsu. We're going to talk about that in a second. Develop clear and concise roles and expectations, and building character and culture. This picture I picked on, this was also from this semester. It's one of my fellow teachers who is prepping a whole bunch of kits for to go home for this with the students for different some project-based learning. And what he actually did was he was in tune with the students and what was going on at home. A lot were feeling anxiety because of the pandemic. So they're actually making Zen gardens. And so it really is poignant there, because what it shows is project-based learning is really transformational, not only in the academic sense, but in the way that we interact with each other, and really targeting some of those 21st century learning skills. And so let's take a deeper look into this, so we can go to the next slide. And so when I say educational jujitsu, what I mean is using the momentum of students in order to accomplish the task and keep that and incentivize that work through that passion and motivation. And so while that means be flexible and use their interests, you will, and I was talking about this in the chat too, you can establish parameters, and it's important to do so, but it's also important to be in tune with what their interests are. So for instance, middle schoolers out there, a lot of students that are into Minecraft. On the right, that's actually a project that I worked with middle school / high schoolers on creating our city in Minecraft. And we did a lot of different engineering and mathematics behind that as well. Looking at differentiation and scaffolding components, and that allows for those strengths to really come to the surface. So while you also want to target areas and you don't want to ignore areas in which students are kind of developing, you definitely want to empower them with those areas of expertise. And the last one here, fail gloriously. We often in a traditional mindset, and this is not just in education, we often see mistakes stigmatized. And so we want to embrace mistakes. So we want to embrace that as part of the learning experience. And when you're preparing all of this, what really comes down to is not necessarily every single informational point, but the broader frameworks of how everything is done. And that's done through clear and concise roles and expectations. So you're going to focus on the structures here and break it down into tangible pieces and tangible roles. The example on the bottom is actually an elementary school example, a playhouse work team where there's somebody that's sweeping and watering plants, but there's also individuals that report repairs and remind individuals of those duties, the managerial roles, the roles in which you're interacting with individuals and you're collaborating on this stuff. So it's not just you have your isolated role, you're actually utilizing your role and connecting with other individuals to accomplish the task. Explicit conversations and discussions on those roles. Be very clear. In the top example, this is a day-to-day operation of all of the tasks for individuals in my class. So they're able to go down the checklist and make sure that they've accomplished those tasks. And while everyone has a role, everyone should be expected to do all of the roles so you don't have any gaps in that knowledge base. We can go to the next slide. And one of the most key elements of all this is building culture. And especially with myself as a white male, be observant of power, not only in privilege, not only within yourself, but within the dynamics of a group of students and individuals. When there's problems that arise, it's really important to kind of diffuse tensions with explicit, open communication with those. Talk about what is happening, talk about what frustrations are coming up and how to best approach that and solve those with everyone. And with that, it's also on the other side of that is fostering morale and constant positive praise. It's just, I'm constantly amazed at what my students do, and I tell them that really every day. We do look at things through a critical lens, but it's really important to keep that environment really positive and keep the momentum going for students. And with that, there's engagement and coaching opportunities. There's a facilitation that happens with project-based learning where I like to use the analogy, it's kind of giving the keys of the car to your teen. You might be hesitant at first, but there's the only way in which you're going to learn to drive. You can watch videos and you can watch and you can take the road test, but to get behind the wheel of the car is a little apprehensive at first and a little nervous, but it's the best way to learn, getting hands-on. I often find myself, and you can see it in the top picture, making sure that I'm not touching the buttons or moving the mouse for them. This is very hands-on. And again, going back to the trial and error, you want to put them in that driver's seat. Reading the room temperature is very important too. If there's certain elements of things that are not being comprehended, or that there's an overall kind of lack of motivation, press the pause button, see what's going on. That's okay. It's part of this is an experimental outlook and approach to everything. And be the conduit for critiques. You can give feedback, but also you can model feedback for other students to give that feedback as well. And that allows them to understand how to kind of interact with each other and how to really communicate effectively. And I saw it in the chat before, and I had a shout out. Students can be those coaches, and we often want to put, with that comes added responsibility and accountability to themselves and others, and really focusing in and using that as a mentor opportunity for them to do that communication and to thrive. And you may have seen on this slide, I'm also getting my PhD at UMass, and I've been looking at emergency remote learning and remote learning strategies in teachers. As a teacher myself, I've been through this frustration and kind of operating in this kind of chaotic world. And so I put some of these together as well. The first thing is leveraging communication platforms, whatever platforms your district has, really use to leverage and understand how each one can work to your advantage. Zoom we use for video conferencing. Email takes a while. If you have Remind or talking points, that's a little bit more immediate. Schoology is a great repository for things. Support with online resources. So I make a lot of screencasts. If you go to our YouTube channel, that visual element of learning, I really hone in on and make specific particular screencasts for things. But also, it's a time for you to understand that your well-being is important as well, and setting clear boundaries. Virtual office hours and putting the phone down and just getting away from all of the noise is really important too. And the last part, realize that it's more than work. We are touching students' lives, and this was at one of the meetings last semester where one person's dog walked into the frame, so everybody grabbed their dogs, and we had a kind of just little introduction and a little puppy love going on. So I hope this gives you an idea of some of the things that I employ in my class. This works at all levels, from elementary all the way to the high school. And if you want any more information, my information is in these slides, and I look forward to answering your questions. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I so appreciate that. My name is Sarah, and as Carolyn mentioned, I work with PBL Works. We're a nonprofit that works with schools and teachers and districts around the world to support them in doing project-based learning. I feel like these questions, well, first, I appreciate Jeremy bringing up the dog, because my dog is snoring gently next to me, and you might hear her on the Zoom. These questions have already been touched on a little bit by Suzie and Jeremy, but I really wanted to talk today about these two questions. We're here to talk about how PBL can help us to meet the moment right now. And as has been discussed in the past year, students and teachers have faced so much change, and things are still changing, right? So as more schools and students transition back to in-person learning, we really have an opportunity to leverage PBL as a tool for supporting students through these continued changes. So these are two questions I want to talk about today through some frameworks and some examples. One is, how can PBL really address the whole child? So supporting social, emotional, and academic needs that students are bringing to school with them. And Suzie and Jeremy already touched on those a little bit. And how can PBL help us to sustain and grow connections among students and across our larger communities when we've been in such a period of change and disconnection? So I'm hearing from a lot of teachers that really when they return to in-person, or even for the teachers who have been teaching in person through this whole time, that just really helping students to stay connected and build those social, emotional, and community building skills are so important. So we can go on to the next slide. And as we dig into these questions, I just want to acknowledge that any instructional practice can either contribute to equity or deepen inequities in schools. And it's really important to engage in PBL with a clear equity lens. And Jeremy gave some great examples of what this can look like in practice. So at PBL Works, we've been thinking about these 4 levers for equity in PBL. So these are aspects of teacher practice that can improve learning experiences for students who've been historically marginalized, and that we believe are a really critical part of high quality project-based learning. So there's a blog post about these levers that will be shared with you in the follow-up email. But they really include knowing your students well and using that knowledge to inform your project design and facilitation, developing cognitively demanding projects that really challenge all students to engage in really meaningful and rigorous intellectual work, incorporating multiple opportunities for students to engage with authentic texts and develop disciplinary literacy skills throughout a project. So lots of opportunities to read, write, and listen and speak in the content area and in authentic contexts. And finally, using structures and practices that redistribute power in the classroom. That's really my why for PBL. I feel like PBL is a tool for redistributing power in schools and in the world, and nurturing student agency and interdependence. So in a moment, I'm going to share some examples of some sample project ideas from the PBL Works online project library that are relevant to the events of the past year. And they really show how you can use PBL to help students reconnect with each other and their communities, engage with rigorous academic content, and do authentic work that matters. So I'd like you to sort of hold the equity levers we just talked about in mind and think about what they might look like in your context and with your students, because that's really where the work starts. So this is the Slow the Spread project is a project that was developed and implemented in the fall of 2020. And this was sort of a special project in partnership with the 1-8 Foundation, Partners in Health, and IBM that some of you may have participated in. It was part of Massachusetts STEM Week. The project focused on using a human-centered design process to create a digital app to help slow the spread of the COVID-19 virus in students' local communities. So students got to learn from public health experts and tech professionals. They conducted interviews with potential users of their apps. They really focused on relevance to particular populations and communities. So they learned a little bit about health disparities, and they tested out their designs. So as part of the project, the students also learned really key math content about interpreting and representing health data and exploring the exponential rate of viral spread. So the students who engaged in this project, they really said that they appreciated being able to address the realities of the pandemic head on, rather than kind of having school be separate from everything else that was happening around them, and that they felt really empowered by the opportunity to do something during a time when they were feeling a lot of helplessness about what was happening around them. We can go on to the next slide. So this is another example project. The Broken Laws project is a social studies project that also feels really relevant this year, during a year when more people are starting to take a critical eye toward inequities in our justice system. So in this project, students learn about legislative processes, they analyze key historical amendments and laws, and they look at how some laws can disproportionately impact different populations. They identify a law that they see as unfair, and they take action to change the law. I really love this project because students have the opportunity to choose something that they're passionate about and work together to make a change around whatever the issue is that they really care about. We can go on to the next slide. The Shrinking Our Footprints project is a project about climate action. Students can measure their family's resource use, they calculate their carbon footprints, and they make an action plan for reducing their family's environmental impact. And during the project, they learn math content. So they learn graphing data, they do calculations with fractions. This was a great project over the last year, not only because the climate crisis is always really relevant and an important topic for students to be thinking about and engaging with, but it was also a project that students could do at home. There was a question earlier in the chat about, how to make the PBL work in a remote context. And this is really a project where students are doing authentic hands-on learning at home with whatever materials they have. And it's an opportunity for them to learn actually with their families. We can go on to the next slide. Yeah, so the last project that I wanted to share today is a primary grades project. So this is for the littles. I know there were some questions about that as well. So in this project, students are learning map skills, and they're creating a welcome guide for new families in their community. So I really love, I think about this project as a project that is especially great for this moment, as students are, I know, especially for those of us in Massachusetts, students are now back in person in school. They're kind of re-engaging with their physical space in their communities when they've been in their homes for a long time. It can really be a tool for helping to rebuild social emotional skills. And I feel like this year, a lot of fear and distrust have kind of been dominant because people are afraid of, of the virus. And this is also a project that can help students to kind of cultivate a sense of welcoming others, of friendliness, of connection, and starting to kind of rebuild connection. So those are just some examples of PBL projects that can be really powerful, that are examples of projects, of students engaging in projects during a year when there's been a lot of change, and just the importance of connecting students to really authentic tasks and challenges. I know that we've covered a lot of ground today, and I just want to emphasize that becoming a strong PBL teacher is really a lifelong journey, and it takes time. So there are two key frameworks for PBL practice that might support you in your journey, and you'll have some more resources about these shared with you as well in the follow-up email. This slide shows what we at PBL Works have learned to be the essential elements of project design. And I want to emphasize what's in the middle, that all projects should center on clear and significant learning goals. This includes your content standards, right? So projects are not something that you do on the side of teaching content. They are a pedagogy and a container for teaching your content in an authentic context. I'll give you a moment to review these and maybe see if there's one element that you would like to begin to kind of go deeper into in your practice in the near future and learn more about. And maybe just take a moment to put that in the chat if there's something that you'd like to kind of grow or expand in your own practice. And then, yeah, so if you would like to kind of dig into reflection or help students have more voice and choice or authenticity, just identifying that and maybe creating an intention. Yeah, public product can be, it's something that you really need to plan for and kind of do from the start, right? Yeah, appreciate these: voice and choice, authenticity. Great. Oh, I see a question about navigating controversial social issues. Yes, that is quite a topic. I think that part of one recommendation that I would make is really upfront, clear communication with families about the project, and then letting students drive the learning. So it's so challenging to facilitate those conversations with students without kind of inserting your own perspective and viewpoint, but really inviting students to engage with multiple perspectives. It's actually, that's such a key part of the critical thinking success skill, and it's embedded in the content standards, right? So really going deep into inviting students to engage critically and to explore opposing viewpoints is so critical. There's more that I can probably provide to you in a follow-up after the session, because there's just so much to say about that. So I'll dig for some resources and share those out. We can go on to the next slide. Really appreciate all these intentions. Yeah, and so the other half, so there's designing projects, and then there's what you do when you're actually facilitating the projects. So in addition to the design elements, we also have these critical teaching practices that effective PBL teachers use when they facilitate projects. And Jeremy highlighted a bunch of these in his own practice. These practices really help to nurture that sense of shared power and intellectual challenge that we talked about earlier. So as you think about projects in your own classroom or project ideas that I just shared, consider how these teaching practices really help to scaffold and support learning for students and deepen their learning throughout the project. We can go on to the next slide. So I just want to return to these questions and really encourage you to reflect on your own context and the amazing work it sounds like that you're all doing with your own students. So I hope that some of the examples and frameworks that I shared sparked some thinking for you. There are a lot of kind of double clicks. So there are links to all of those projects and frameworks that will be shared with you. And I would love to hear how you're using PBL with your own students to foster authentic connection and meet students' needs in this moment. So if you have questions, ideas, or reflections, or examples of things that you're doing, we can go on to the next slide. Please share those in the chat. Dog toys, love it. I love this dog themed webinar right now. I might have a puppy to give feedback. Oh, amazing, Joaquin. Oh, love that, Erin, the community fridge. Yeah, so really students engaging with needs that are happening right now. Love it. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to pass it on to Bess.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been wonderful sitting here and listening to our presenters this far, and also to see so many of you on a webinar like this. I can only imagine how busy your days are, how much you've had to do during this pandemic for your students and for yourself, and to see you present here and engaged in this fantastic conversation and just the thinking that's going on is really very powerful. This evening, I will be going into some of the specifics about how you can find resources on PBS Learning Media, specifically tonight for project-based learning, but these resources are there to support your teaching and enhance student learning in all content areas and throughout grades. So this is the homepage for PBS Learning Media, and specifically for project-based learning, PBL, wherever you are, armchair traveler to Scout, I think you can find some really inspired resources. And these resources are from PBS programming and from partners like NASA and the Library of Congress, to name just a few. This homepage has some arrows, the right one pointing to where you can easily register freely, a free registration if you haven't already signed up. And once you do that, your local PBS station will appear on the left side, upper left, where you see the arrow. And once you register, you're going to be able to save resources for whatever you may want to use them for or to explore them more. In the next slide, these are what you're able to do on PBS Learning Media. You can find resources in a variety of ways, including searching by standards, national and state standards. And we know that standards are important in considering your PBL. With so many resources in a variety of forms, you sometimes may find it helpful to filter and narrow your search. So for example, if you're searching something just under the subject of science, you can narrow down to earth and space science or life science, as well as other subdivisions. And once you are registered, you can save those resources and you can even organize them in folders. And we know that a lot of teachers appreciate the fact that they can integrate with Google Classroom as well as other platforms. Next slide, please. What I'd like to do now in the next few slides is to connect with some of the specific PBLs that Sarah shared with you. One of the projects that Sarah shared with us was about students developing their own mobile apps to help stem the spread of COVID. Now, when I started searching PBS Learning Media, I found many resources on COVID, virus information prevention, even the design process. When I specifically typed in designing apps in the search box, one of the many resources that came up was this toolkit from a collection where students are learning to see smartphone apps as a tool to solve real world problems. The arrow on the left of the slide points to the outline of a heart. And when you want to save a resource, again, to either examine later or possibly use, you just click on that heart and it becomes your favorite. On the right side, you can see the support materials here that accompany this resource. And in virtually all of the resources on PBS Learning Media, there are support materials for teachers and for use with students. Next slide, please, Carolyn. Just to point out before we look specifically at this powerful resource, if you look on the left side, the arrow shows you that this resource has been checked as a favorite. So that heart fills in, and then you just go into under your name where it'll appear once you're registered, and you'll find your favorites, among other things, on your dashboard. Now, this resource, How Have Guns Changed, Gun Laws Changed Since Sandy Hook, connects with the project shared with us by Sarah about those broken laws and how students how we can, and in this case, students can change laws to make society better. And in this video, which I found on Learning Media, which is from PBS NewsHour. It's a great news program. You might be familiar with it on PBS, and they have a whole collection of news articles that they have, talk about current events that you can access, and they create lessons and other resources for the classroom. So this one from PBS NewsHour is all too relevant given the ongoing mass shootings in our country. We won't watch it all because of time, but the beginning of it puts into some heartbreaking context the day when a mother put her son on the school bus for the last time. And where Carolyn is going to start the video for us is after that terrible day, when this mother and others joined forces with then Connecticut Governor Malloy to help pass a new law on gun safety.
But since that terrible day, The two have become allies in the fight for new gun restrictions and regulations that would keep weapons out of the hands of the mentally ill. As the communications director for Sandy Hook Promise, an organization founded in the aftermath of the tragedy, Hockley advocated in Washington, D.C. for new legislation.
I'm one of those people that I have to do something to stop it. I can't let it be a senseless tragedy because it was a preventable tragedy.
While federal legislation stalled in partisan gridlock, in April of 2013, Governor Malloy signed into Connecticut law some of the most restrictive gun policies in the country. And while gun violence experts say it's far too early to tell how effective the new law is, Governor Malloy points to the fact that there were 32% fewer murders in 2013 than 2011.
Okay, and I just want to point out that as this video goes on, it shows a gun collector and a gun advocate who talks about his plans to leave the state because of this new law and his argument against gun control. So it's really a very powerful resource and one that can generate a lot of conversation and thinking for students who are perhaps looking at ways and what new laws they might want to advocate for. Next slide. So this resource is inspired by the PBL project we saw from Sarah about shrinking our footprints. I found this video in a collection called Young Voices for the Planet film series. And Carolyn is going to play a portion of the video for us where students describe how their school's green ambassadors engage in composting, planting trees, and recycling.
Green transformation.
Our school, we had a lunch system that would create so much waste. So last semester, we worked on a project called Clean Plate Club.
These are our waste stations. We have compost, fruits, vegetables, eggshells. We have recycled. So plastic bottles only numbers 1 and 2. And we have landfill. And we want to raise awareness. And we also want people to see what can go in the landfill. Right here is our #1 method of compost. We're using an old bathtub to put our organic matter from the waste bins. Worms are breaking it down to compost. We're gonna get good, healthy soil for our plants, our fruit trees. We planted 60 different fruit trees with over 30 varieties. Trees get the carbon dioxide out of the air, so planting more trees can reduce your carbon footprint. The coolest thing for me was that we actually got to plant the trees, so we can go back 20 years later and say, hey, I planted that avocado tree, I planted that kiwi tree.
Yeah, so those final comments by the students suggest the kind of impact and long-term benefits that projects like this can have. And if we were able to listen to more of the video, we'd also hear how the Green Ambassadors educate younger children about renewable energy solutions. This slide is really generated from the last project Sarah showed with us, but also there's been some conversation in the box about PBL for those young learners. And I know that one of the questions that was submitted by a registrant was about how we can use PBL for kindergartners. So this video and others you see below it, because you'll always see related resources that you might want to explore as well. It's one resource among the many for pre-K, K, and early elementary grades at Learning Media. And we're just going to play it so you can hear it. It is from the collection from GBH, Bringing the Universe to America's Classroom.
All around town. Today, I'm helping my dad run errands. We need to go to the grocery store, the library, and the bank. He says we had time to stop at the park too. Dad gave me a map that shows the places we need to visit. I get to choose where we go first. Starting at my house. You can see it on the map here. We'll Let's look at the map to see what's closest to my house. This is the bank. This is the grocery store. This is the library. And here is the park, which is close.
Okay, so that gives you a little taste of that video and how it may play into children creating maps, creating community maps, whatever the project may be. And I wanted to also point out here on the right, you can see the arrows. The top arrows point to the fact that this resource is available in Spanish as well as English. There are a lot of Spanish resources available on the site, especially, but not always just for younger children. And then I superimpose the support materials in the lower right corner of the slide, so you could see that those support materials are also available in Spanish as well as English. So this last slide that we're going to look at now, the last slide for me, this is the last resource I'm going to share tonight, but it's a resource that keeps giving in a way, because there are many resources that we post on New England Public Media's education blog regularly. And it covers the range of grades pre-K through 12, not only resources, professional development opportunities, and more. Tonight's webinar was posted on the blog earlier, for example. And this screenshot shows the most recent post with some of the resources I wish we could have looked at tonight related to project-based learning. Because somebody had asked about PBL for English language arts when she or he registered. The resource that you see featured in the photograph is, it's called Teaching PB Lessons, Sound Field. And in it, an English teacher and students talk about narrative writing projects in which they're writing stories and they're doing songwriting. And then they have the opportunity to hear their written creations on the radio. I think that if not now, then on the handout you'll get, there will be a link to our blog in the chat, and we invite you to follow us. And now I'll turn it over to Carolyn. Thank you.
And thank you, Bess. We have packed a lot of information into this, and I apologize that we've gone a little over time. I understand if you need to log off, we are recording. You'll hear these last final comments on the recording if you need to leave. But this will also give our presenters more opportunity to respond to some of your questions in the chat. So ask away and chat away. You've seen some of the resources on PBS Learning Media. I just want to give you very quickly an idea, kind of whet your appetite of what else is on the site and inspire you to explore it on your own. There are hundreds of collections of resources that are organized around a topic or a program. And these are 3 examples for the early grades. You'll have links to all of these in that resource document we talk about. Collections for the middle grades. Actually, Bringing the Universe to America's Classrooms in the middle here is for all grades, for K-12, Earth and Space Science resources that are the result of a collaboration between GBH and NASA, and they are fabulous. And then collections for higher grades from our programs. There are hundreds of Nova clips, Frontline, American Experience, and you imagine a full-length program on TV, and then we carefully edit down to a 3 to 5 minute clip that tells a story and addresses a standard. We record all of our webinars, and the recordings are all available on GBH Education YouTube channel. We do have a playlist, or there's a section on PBL, and there are links to 3 recordings of webinars that we have done in the past. at least 2 of them, maybe all 3, featured Suzie Boss as a speaker. I can't remember. The years are kind of blending into one another. But some of these go through more of the basics of PBL. So I think looking at that coupled with what you have tonight, you're really in good hands to get started if that's where you're at. Coming up soon, April 15th, we have a webinar for mathematics, grade 5 through algebra. And that will be 7 p.m., which is where when we have all of our webinars, 7 p.m. ET. And then we have others planned for May and the summer. We are very active on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and whatever. I'm just looking here at my notes here to make sure I'm covering everything. All right, we really appreciate you helping us do better and complete a brief post-webinar survey. The research department at GBH handles this survey, passes the results along to us anonymously, and we really take to heart what your comments are. And at the end of you taking the survey, you have an opportunity to download a certificate of completion if that is important to you. I want to thank you. I want to thank all of our presenters, Sarah and Suzie, Jeremy and Bess. It's been a lot of fun working with you. Uli, best of luck to all the Pioneer Valley educators who won the award this year. And thank you to the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. My name's Carolyn Jacobs again. Here is my email. You are welcome to email me with any questions. If you can't find something or have a question about whatever, please let me know. We will go through the chat. We will add some resources to that resource document from the chat. I'll keep things open for another couple of minutes. If anybody has any of the presenters have a last word or two, and then we'll shut down and wish you all a lovely evening and a good night's sleep.
I'll just jump in for a minute to thank everyone. This has been a very active chat. The questions are amazing and interesting and wonderful. I see a lot of you helping each other with resources and getting things started. One of you said, if I could just find one other teacher to connect with, and that's it, just start with one, reach out, only connect. Those are words to live by. So thanks for getting started tonight.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It was so exciting to hear your ideas and questions, and wish I could dig more into that. We wish we could just like stay in the Zoom all night with you, sort of.
Yeah, echoing everybody's sentiments here. One of the things as a teacher that I always come out of kind of professional development or things like this, what can I do immediately? What can I do? I'm pumped. I just got motivated from all of this. One of the biggest things, take a look at some of the resources in that we've been sending and that are in this this slide. Just start looking at different projects. You don't necessarily need to pick one, but just look at it, see all the components, see what it's all about. And just do that immediate action and just dive in. It's all about experimentation, and it's all about making yourself confident and comfortable in trying this bit by bit by bit.
Yeah, and I noticed in the comments occasionally people were appreciative but feeling overwhelmed somewhat with all that's here. My concern is always, do we give enough? Have we given enough examples and resources? But I think it's natural and perhaps a kind of a positive comment to feel overwhelmed. There's so much here. And I think as Suzie suggests, sometimes just starting small, maybe, and connecting with somebody else. I know in some of the projects I did as a teacher, even cross-disciplining, if that's a word, but going to, your friends and colleagues in other disciplines and sitting down and trying to come up with ways that you can really engage kids. And I'm really so pleased tonight that several of our presenters were really focused on the idea of we're in remote learning. We've been forced into it more than ever. Perhaps we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Let's hope so. But I think a reality is that probably, remote learning is here to stay in different ways. And so the ways that Jeremy and Sarah and Suzie have suggested that we can continue to do this kind of PBL work virtually, connecting with kids when we need to, is a really positive contribution as well. So thank you.
Okay, I wish you all a lovely evening, good night's sleep, a good spring break if you are blessed with a spring break. And we will be in touch. Look for the follow-up email from us and then more events coming, and let us know what you think. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Carolyn. Appreciate it. Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.